to Declassified. I'm your host, Gina Shakespeare. You are now watching part one of a two-part series on Spygate, the true story of collusion, how America's most powerful agencies were weaponized against President Donald Trump. Spygate will likely be remembered as the biggest political scandal in modern history. Obama administration officials actively colluded with the campaign of Hillary Clinton and foreign governments to affect the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Unofficial intelligence, spy traps, and a politically funded dossier were used to launch a counterintelligence investigation and surveil the campaign of candidate Donald Trump. Efforts intensified following the election through the use of coordinated leaks and the ongoing creation of false narratives in the media. Jasper Fackett, chief editor of the American editions of the Epoch Times, along with Epoch Times contributor Jeff Carlson, have designed a comprehensive infographic to match this video and help you explore the connections of Spygate. The link is in the description below. In part one, we will be covering the FBI, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, the Department of Justice, the battle between Rosenstein and McCabe, and concluding with the State Department. Just before we get underway, please feel free to subscribe, like, and hit the notifications button. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. Let's get underway with this story written by Epoch Times contributor Jeff Carlson. Although the details remain complex, the structure underlying Spygate, the creation of the false narrative that candidate Donald Trump colluded with Russia, and the spying on his presidential campaign remains surprisingly simple. It can be broken down into 7 parts. Number 1. CIA Director John Brennan, with some assistance from Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, gathered information, intelligence, and fed it throughout our domestic intelligence community. Number 2. The FBI became the handler of Brennan's intelligence and engaged in more practical elements of surveillance. Number 3. The Department of Justice facilitated investigations by the FBI and legal maneuverings while providing a crucial shield of non-disclosure. Number 4. The Department of State became a mechanism of information dissemination and leaks. Number 5. Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign and the Democratic National Committee provided funding, support, and media collusion. Number 6. Obama administration officials were complicit and engaged in unmasking and intelligence gathering and dissemination. Number 7. The media was the most corrosive element in many respects. None of these events could have transpired without their willing participation. Stories were pushed, facts were ignored, and narratives were prompted. Let's start with a simple premise. The candidacy of Trump presented both an opportunity and a threat. Initially not viewed with any real seriousness, Trump's campaign was seen as an opportunistic wedge in the election process. At the same time, and particularly as the viability of his candidacy increased, Trump was seen as an existential threat to the established political system. The sudden legitimacy of Trump's candidacy was not welcomed by the US political establishment. Here was a true political outsider who had no traditional allegiances. He was brash and boastful, he ignored political correctness, he couldn't be bought, and he didn't care what others thought of him. He trusted himself. Governing bodies in Britain and the European Union were also worried. Candidate Trump was openly challenging monetary policy, regulations, and the power of special interests. He challenged Congress, he challenged the United Nations and the European Union. He questioned everything. Brennan became the point man in the operation to stop a potential Trump presidency. It remains unclear whether his role was self-appointed or came from above. To embark on such a mission without direct presidential authority seems both a stretch of the imagination and particularly foolhardy. Brennan took unofficial foreign intelligence compiled by contacts, colleagues and associates, primarily from the UK, but also from other Five Eyes members such as Australia, individuals in official positions in UK intelligence such as Robert Hannigan, head of the UK Government Communications Headquarters, Britain's equivalent of the National Security Agency, partnered with former UK intelligence members, former MI6 head Sir Richard Dearlove, former Ambassador Sir Andrew Wood, and private UK intelligence firm Hacklit all played a role. In summer of 2016, Hannigan travelled to Washington to meet with Brennan regarding alleged communications between the Trump campaign and Moscow. On January 23, 2017, 3 days after Trump's inauguration, Hannigan abruptly announced his retirement. The Guardian openly speculated that Hannigan's resignation was directly related to the sharing of UK intelligence. One method used to help establish evidence of collusion was the employment of spy traps. Prominent among these were ones set for campaign advisors George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. The intent was to provide or establish connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. The content and context mattered little, as long as a connection could be established that could then be publicized. The June 2016 Trump Tower meeting was another such attempt. Western intelligence assets were used to initiate and establish these connections, particularly in the cases of Papadopoulos and Page. Ultimately, Brennan formed an interagency task force comprising an estimated 6 agencies and all government departments. The FBI, Treasury, and DOJ handled the domestic inquiry into Trump and possible Russia connections. The CIA, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the National Security Agency, NSA, handled foreign and intelligence aspects. Brennan's interagency task force is not to be confused with the July 2016 FBI counterintelligence investigation, which was formed later at Brennan's urging. During this time, Brennan also employed the use of reverse targeting, which relates to the targeting of a foreign individual with the intent of capturing data on a US citizen. This effort was uncovered and made public by Devin Nunes in a March 2017 press conference. I have seen intelligence reports that clearly show the president-elect and his team were monitored and disseminated out in intelligence reporting channels. Details about persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little apparent foreign intelligence value were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. From what I know right now, it looks like incidental collection. We don't know exactly how that was picked up, but we're trying to get to the bottom of it. As this foreign intelligence, unofficial in nature and outside of any traditional channels, was gathered, Brennan began a process of feeding his gathered intelligence to the FBI. Repeated transfers of foreign intelligence from the CIA director pushed the FBI toward the establishment of a formal counterintelligence investigation. Brennan repeatedly noted this during a May 23, 2017 congressional testimony. I made sure that anything that was involving US persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the FBI. Brennan also admitted that his intelligence helped establish the FBI investigation. I was aware of intelligence and information about contacts between Russian officials and US persons that raised concerns in my mind about whether or not those individuals were cooperating with the Russians, either in a witting or unwitting fashion, and it served as the basis for the FBI investigation to determine whether such collusion or cooperation occurred. This admission is important as no official intelligence was used to open the FBI's investigation. Once the FBI began its counterintelligence investigation on July 31, 2016, Brennan shifted his focus. Through a series of meetings in August and September 2016, Brennan informed the Congressional Gang of 8 regarding intelligence and information he had gathered. Notably, each Gang of 8 member was briefed separately, calling into question whether each of the members received the same information. Efforts to block the release of the transcripts from each meeting remains ongoing. The last major section of Brennan's efforts involved a series of 3 reports and greater participation from Clapper. The first report, the joint statement from the Department of Homeland Security and Office of the Director of National Intelligence on Election Security, was released on October 7, 2016. The second report, Grizzly Steppe, Russian malicious cyber activity, was released on December 29, 2016. The third report, assessing Russian activities and intentions in recent US elections, also known as the Intelligence Community Assessment, ICA, was released on January 6, 2017. This final report was used to continue pushing the Russian collusion narrative following the election of President Donald Trump. Notably, Admiral Mike Rogers of the NSA publicly dissented from the findings of the ICA, assigning only a moderate confidence level. Next up, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Although the FBI is technically part of the DOJ, it is best for the purposes of this article that the FBI and DOJ be viewed as separate entities, each with its own related ties. The FBI itself was comprised of various factions with a particularly active element that has come to be known as the Insurance Policy Group. It appears that this faction was led by FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and comprised other notable names such as FBI Agent Peter Strzok, FBI lawyer Lisa Page, and FBI General Counsel James Baker. The FBI established the counterintelligence investigation into alleged Russia collusion with the Trump campaign on July 31, 2016. Comey initially refused to say whether the FBI was investigating possible connections between members of the Trump campaign and Russia. He would continue to refuse to provide answers until March 20, 2017, when he disclosed the existence of the FBI investigation during congressional testimony. Comey also testified that he did not provide notification to the Gang of Eight until early March 2017, less than 1 month earlier. This admission was in stark contrast to actions taken by Brennan, who had notified members of the Gang of Eight individually during August and September 2016. It's likely that Brennan never informed Comey that he had briefed the Gang of Eight in 2016. Comey did note that the DOJ had been aware of the investigation all along. Following Comey's firing on May 9, 2017, the FBI's investigation was transferred to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The Mueller investigation remains ongoing. The FBI's formal involvement with the Steele dossier began on July 5, 2016, when Mike Gator, an FBI agent and assistant legal attaché at the US Embassy in Rome, was dispatched to visit former MI6 spy Christopher Steele in London. Gator would return from this meeting with a copy of Steele's first memo. This memo was given to Victoria Nuland at the State Department, who passed it along to the FBI. Gator, who also headed the FBI's Eurasian Organised Crime Unit, had known Steele since at least 2010, when Steele had provided assistance to the FBI's investigation into the FIFA corruption scandal. Prior to the London meeting, Gator may also have met on a less formal basis with Steele several weeks earlier. In June, Steele flew to Rome to brief the FBI contact with whom he had cooperated over FIFA, The Guardian reported. His information started to reach the Bureau in Washington. It's worth noting that there was no dossier until it was fully compiled in December 2016. There was also a sequence of documents from Steele, documents that were passed on individually as they were created. Therefore, from the FBI's legal perspective, they didn't use the dossier. They used individual documents. For the next month and a half, there appeared to be little contact between Steele and the FBI. However, the FBI's interest in the dossier suddenly accelerated in late August 2016, when the Bureau asked Steele for all information in his possession and for him to explain how the material had been gathered and to identify his sources. In September 2016, Steele travelled back to Rome to meet with the FBI's Eurasian squad once again. It's likely that the meeting included several other FBI officials as well. According to a House Intelligence Committee minority memo, Steele's reporting reached the FBI counterintelligence team in mid-September 2016, the same time as Steele's September trip to Rome. The reason for the FBI's renewed interest had to do with an advisor to the Trump campaign, Carter Page, who had been in contact with Stephen Halper, a CIA and FBI source since July 2016. Halper arranged to meet with Page for the first time on July 11, 2016, at a Cambridge symposium, just 3 days after Page took a trip to Moscow. Speakers at the symposium included Madeleine Albright, Vin Weber, and Sir Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6. Page was now the FBI's chosen target for a FISA warrant that would be obtained on October 21, 2016. The Steele dossier would be the primary evidence used in obtaining the FISA warrant, which would be renewed 3 separate times, including after Trump took office, finally expiring in September 2017. After being in contact with Page for 14 months, Halper stopped contact exactly as the final FISA warrant on Page expired. Page, who had steadfastly maintained his innocence, was never charged with any crime by the FBI. Efforts for the declassification of the Page FISA application are currently ongoing through the DOJ's Office of the Inspector General. Next up, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were 2 prominent members of the FBI's Insurance Policy Group. Strzok, a senior FBI agent, was the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. Lisa Page, an FBI lawyer, served as special counsel to FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Strzok was in charge of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server for government business. He helped FBI Director James Comey draft the statement exonerating Clinton and was personally responsible for changing specific wording within the statement that reduced Clinton's legal liability. Specifically, Strzok changed the words grossly negligent, which could be a criminal offense, to extremely careless. Strzok also personally led the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into the alleged Trump-Russia collusion and signed the documents that opened the investigation on July 31, 2016. He was one of the FBI agents who interviewed Trump's national security advisor, General Michael Flynn. Strzok met multiple times with DOJ official Bruce Orr and received information from Steele at those meetings. Following the firing of FBI Director James Comey, Strzok would also join the team of special counsel Robert Mueller. 2 months later, he was removed from that team after the DOJ Inspector General discovered a lengthy series of texts between Strzok and Page that contained politically charged messages. Strzok would be fired from the FBI in August 2018. Both Strzok and Page engaged in strategic leaking to the press. Page did so at the direction of McCabe, who directly authorized Page to share information with Wall Street Journal reporter Devlin Barrett. That information was used in an October 30, 2016 article headlined FBI in Internal Feud Over Hillary Clinton Probe. Page leaked to Barrett, thinking she had been granted legal and official authorization to do so. McCabe would later initially deny providing such authorization to the Office of Inspector General. Page, when confronted with McCabe's denials, produced texts refuting his statement. It was these texts that led to the Inspector General uncovering the texts between Strzok and Page. The two exchanged thousands of texts, some of them indicating surveillance activities over a 2-year period. Texts sent between August 21, 2015 and June 25, 2017 have been made public. The series comes to an end with a final text by Page telling Strzok, "Don't ever text me again." On August 8, 2016, Strzok wrote that they would prevent candidate Trump from becoming president. Trump is not ever going to become president, right? Right? Strzok, no, he won't. We'll stop it. On August 15, 2016, Strzok sent a text referring to an insurance policy. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way Trump gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. The insurance policy appears to have been the effort to legitimize the Trump-Russia collusion narrative so that an FBI investigation led by McCabe could continue unhindered. Next up, the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice, which comprises 60 agencies, was transformed during the Obama years. The department is forbidden by federal law from hiring employees based on political affiliation. However, a series of investigative articles by PJ Media published during Eric Holder's tenure as Attorney General revealed an unsettling pattern of ideological conformity among new hires at the DOJ. Only lawyers from the progressive left were hired. Not one single moderate or conservative lawyer made the cut. This is significant as the DOJ enjoys significant latitude in determining who will be subject to prosecution. The DOJ's job in Spygate was to facilitate the legal side of surveillance while providing a protective layer of cover for all those involved. The department became a repository of information and provided a protective wall between the investigative efforts of the FBI and the legislative branch. Importantly, it also served as the firewall within the executive branch, serving as the insulating barrier between the FBI and Obama officials. The department had become legendary for its stonewalling tactics with Congress. The DOJ, which was fully aware of the actions being taken by James Comey and the FBI, also became an active element acting against members of the Trump campaign. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, along with Mary McCord, the head of the DOJ's National Security Division, was actively involved in efforts to remove General Michael Flynn from his position as National Security Advisor to President Trump. To this day, it remains unknown which individual was responsible for making public Flynn's call with the Russian ambassador. Flynn ultimately pleaded guilty to a process crime, lying to the FBI. There have been questions raised in Congress regarding the possible alteration of FD 302s, the written notes of Flynn's FBI interviews. Special counsel Robert Mueller has repeatedly deferred Flynn's sentencing hearing. David Luffman, Deputy Assistant Attorney General in charge of counterintelligence at the DOJ's National Security Division, played a key role in both the Clinton email server and Russian hacking investigations. Luffman is currently the attorney for Monica McLean, the longtime friend of Christine Blasey Ford, who recently accused Judge Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her while in high school. McLean was also employed by the FBI for 24 years. Bruce Ohr was a significant DOJ official who played a key role in Spygate. Ohr held two important positions at the DOJ, Associate Deputy Attorney General and Director of the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. As Associate Deputy Attorney General, Ohr was just 4 offices away from then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, and he reported directly to her. As Director of the task force, he was in charge of a program described as the centerpiece of the Attorney General's drug strategy. Or one of the highest-ranking officials in the DOJ was communicating on an ongoing basis with Steele, whom he had known since at least 2006, well into mid-2017. He is also married to Nellie Ohr, an expert on Russia and Eurasia, who began working for Fusion GPS sometime in late 2015. Nellie Ohr likely played a significant role in the construction of the dossier. According to testimony from FBI agent Peter Strzok, he and Ohr met at least 5 times during 2016 and 2017. Strzok was working directly with then Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. Additionally, Ohr met with the FBI at least 12 times between late November 2016 and May 2017 for a series of interviews. These meetings could have been used to transmit information from Steele FBI at least during 2016 and 2017. Strzok was working directly with then Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. Additionally, Ohr met with the FBI at least 12 times between late November 2016 and May 2017 for a series of interviews. These meetings could have been used to transmit information from Steele to the FBI. This came after the FBI had formally severed contact with Steele in late October or early November 2016. John Carlin is another notable figure with the DOJ. Carlin was an Assistant Attorney General and the head of the DOJ's National Security Division until October 2016. His role will be discussed in Part 2 of this 2-part series. Next up, the battle between Rosenstein and McCabe. Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe held a pivotal role in what has become known as Spygate. He directed the activities of Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and was involved in all aspects of the Russia investigation. He was also mentioned in the infamous insurance policy text message. McCabe was a major component of the insurance policy. On April 26, 2017, Rosenstein found himself appointed as the new Deputy Attorney General. He was placed into a somewhat chaotic situation, as Attorney General Jeff Sessions had recused himself from the ongoing Russia investigation a little less than 2 months earlier. This effectively meant that no one in the Trump administration had any oversight of the ongoing investigation being conducted by the FBI and the DOJ. Additionally, the leadership of then FBI Director James Comey was coming under increased scrutiny as the results of actions taken leading up to and following the election, particularly Comey's handling of the Clinton email investigation. On May 9, 2017, Rosenstein wrote a memorandum recommending that Comey be fired. The subject of the memo was restoring public confidence in the FBI. Comey was fired that day. McCabe was now the acting director of the FBI and was immediately under consideration for the permanent position. On the same day Comey was fired, McCabe would lie during an interview with agents from the FBI's Inspection Division regarding apparent leaks that were used in an October 30, 2016 Wall Street Journal article, FBI in Internal Feud Over Hillary Clinton Probe, by Devlin Barrett. This would later be disclosed in the Inspector General's report, a report of investigation of certain allegations relating to former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. At this time, nobody, including the FBI's Inspection Division agents, knew that McCabe had lied, nor were the darker aspects of McCabe's role in Spygate fully known. In late April or early May 2016, McCabe opened a federal criminal investigation on Sessions regarding potential lack of candor before Congress in relation to Sessions' contacts with Russians. Sessions was unaware of the investigation. Sessions would later be cleared of any wrongdoing by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. On the morning of May 16, 2017, Rosenstein reportedly suggested to McCabe that he secretly record President Trump. This remark was reported in a New York Times article that was sourced from memos from the now-fired McCabe, along with testimony taken from former FBI General Counsel James Baker, who relayed a conversation he had with McCabe about the occurrence. Rosenstein issued a statement denying the accusations. The alleged comments by Rosenstein occurred at a meeting where McCabe was pushing for the Justice Department to open an investigation into the president. An unnamed participant at the meeting, in comments to the Washington Post, framed the conversation somewhat differently, noting Rosenstein responded sarcastically to McCabe saying, "What do you want to do, Andy? Wire the president?" Later, on the same day that Rosenstein had meetings with McCabe, President Trump met Mueller, reportedly as an interview for the FBI director job. The May 17th appointment of Mueller, in effect, shifted control of the Russia investigation from the FBI and McCabe to Mueller. Rosenstein would retain ultimate authority for the probe, and any expansion of Mueller's investigation required authorization from Rosenstein. Interestingly, without Comey's memo leaks, a special counsel might not have been appointed. The FBI and possibly McCabe would have remained in charge of the Russian investigation. McCabe was probably not going to become the permanent FBI director, but he was reportedly under consideration. Regardless, without Comey's leak, McCabe would have retained direct involvement and the FBI would have retained control. On July 28, 2017, McCabe lied to Inspector General Michael Horowitz while under oath regarding authorization of the leaking to the Wall Street Journal. At this point, Horowitz knew McCabe was lying but did not yet know of the May 9th Inspection Division interview with McCabe. On August 2, 2017, Rosenstein secretly issued Mueller a revised memo on the scope of the investigation and definition of authority that remains heavily redacted. The full purpose of this memo remains unknown. On this same day, Christopher Wray was named as the new FBI director. 2 days later, on August 4, 2017, Sessions announced that the FBI had created a new leaks investigation unit. Rosenstein and Wray were tasked with overseeing all leak investigations. That August 2nd memo from Rosenstein to Mueller may have been specifically designed to remove any residual FBI influence, specifically that of McCabe, from the Russia investigation. The appointment of Wray as FBI director helped cement this. McCabe was finally completely neutralized. On May 16, 2018, McCabe was fired for lying under oath at least 3 different times and is currently the subject of a grand jury investigation. And finally, the State Department. The State Department, with its many contacts within foreign governments, became a conduit for the flow of information. The transfer of Christopher Steele's first dossier memo was personally facilitated by Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. Nuland gave approval for FBI agent Michael Gator to travel to London to obtain the memo from Steele. The memo may have passed directly from her to FBI leadership. Secretary of State John Kerry was also given a copy. Steele was already well known within the State Department. Following Steele's involvement in the FIFA scandal investigation, he began to provide reports informally to the State Department. The reports were written for a private client but were shared widely within the US State Department and sent up to Secretary of State John Kerry and Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, who was in charge of the US response to Putin's annexation of Crimea and covert invasion of eastern Ukraine, The Guardian reported. In July 2016, when the FBI wanted to send Gator to visit Steele in London, the Bureau sought permission from the Office of Nuland, who provided this version of events during a February 4, 2018 appearance on CBS's Face the Nation. In the middle of July, when Steele was doing this other work and became concerned, he passed 2 to 4 pages of short points of what he was finding, and our immediate reaction to that was, this is not in our purview. This needs to go to the FBI if there is any concern here that one candidate or the election as a whole might be influenced by the Russian Federation. That's something for the FBI to investigate. Steele also met with Jonathan Weiner, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Law Enforcement and former Special Envoy for Libya. Steele and Weiner had known each other since at least 2010. In an opinion article in the Washington Post, Weiner wrote the following. In September 2016, Steele and I met in Washington and discussed the information now known as the dossier. Steele's sources suggested that the Kremlin not only had been behind the hacking of the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign, but also had compromised Trump and developed ties with his associates and campaign. In a strange turn of events, Weiner also received a separate dossier, very similar to Steele's, from long-term Clinton confidant Sidney Blumenthal. This second dossier had been compiled by another longtime Clinton operative, former journalist Cody Scherer, and echoed claims made in the Steele dossier. Weiner then met with Steele in late September 2016 and gave Steele a copy of the second dossier. Steele went on to share the second dossier with the FBI, which may have been used to corroborate his dossier. Other foreign officials also used conduits into the State Department. Alexander Downer, Australia's High Commissioner to the UK, reportedly funneled his conversation with Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, later used as a reason to open the FBI's counterintelligence investigation directly to the US Embassy in London. The Downer details landed with the embassy's then charge d'affaires Elizabeth Dibble, who previously served as a principal deputy assistant secretary in Mrs. Clinton's State Department. The Wall Street Journal's Kimberly Strassel wrote in a May 31, 2018 article, "If true, this would mean that neither Australian intelligence nor the Australian government alerted the FBI to the Papadopoulos information. What happened with the Downer details and to whom they were ultimately relayed remains unknown." Curiously, details surprisingly similar to the Papadopoulos-Downer conversation show up in the first memo written by Steele on June 20th, 2016. A dossier of compromising information on Hillary Clinton has been collated by the Russian intelligence services over many years and mainly comprises bugged conversations she had on various visits to Russia and intercepted phone calls. It has not yet been distributed abroad, including to Trump. This concludes part 1 of our 2-part series on Spygate. In part 2, we will begin that episode by discussing involvement by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, Perkins Coie, the Obama administration, Executive Order 13762, the media, foreign intelligence, Fusion GPS, Orbis, and Christopher Steele, plus spy traps, Pfizer abuse, and the insurance policy. Just before we finish, please remember to subscribe to Declassified, like, and hit the notifications button. I look forward to your company in part 2.